Ancient humans had more free time than you do. A lot more. No 9 to 5, no emails, no commute. Some of our ancestors worked maybe 3 hours a day and then had the entire rest of it free. Which sounds like paradise, laughter until you realize what that actually means. No phone, no shows, no music, no books, nothing. Just hours and hours of nothing. So here's the question nobody thinks to ask. What did they do with all that time? Because the answer isn't nothing. The answer is that a bored human might be the most powerful creative force in the history of the planet, and it may be the entire reason you can talk, tell stories, and make art today. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you're going to see your own boredom completely differently. You're lying on your back in the grass. It's some warm evening tens of thousands of years ago. You've already eaten. Nobody's chasing you. The kids are asleep. There is no work tomorrow, because there is no such thing as work, and you are staring up at the sky doing the one thing every human being has done since the beginning of time. Absolutely nothing. And here's the question that's going to haunt this entire video. Were you bored? Because think about it. No phone. No feed to scroll. No show to binge. No game to load. No group chat lighting up. No headphones. No reading won't be invented for tens of thousands of years. Just you, the dark, some crackling fire, and a truly enormous amount of empty time stretching out in every direction. We tend to imagine prehistoric life as this non-stop struggle, a grim, muddy grind of hunting and running and not dying. But that picture is mostly wrong. Surprise. The uncomfortable, hilarious truth is that ancient humans had way more free time than you do. And that raises a genuinely fascinating problem the anthropologists actually argue about. What do you do with all that time when there is, quite literally, nothing to do? Because the answer isn't nothing. The answer is that a bored human is one of the most dangerous, creative, and world-changing forces in the entire history of the planet. Nearly everything you love, music, stories, jokes, sports, religion, may exist because at some point a person sat around with too much time on their hands and thought, okay, I have DOT to do something with myself. This is the story of ancient boredom. And it might be the story of how we became human. Let's kill the biggest myth first, because it changes everything. You've probably absorbed, somewhere along the way, the idea that prehistoric life was a desperate, round-the-clock fight for survival. That our ancestors spent every waking hour scrounging for food, barely staying alive, collapsing exhausted at night, only to wake up and do it again. It's a very dramatic picture. It's also basically fiction. When anthropologists actually went and studied modern hunter-gatherer societies, people living in ways that resemble our deep past, they found something that annoyed a lot of people. These groups often secured everything they needed to survive in something like 3 to 5 hours a day. One famous study of the San people of the Kalahari found adults spending only a handful of hours a day on getting food. The rest, free. Think about that. Surprise. A lot of foraging societies effectively worked a part-time schedule and then clocked out. The anthropologist Marshall Salins looked at this and coined a phrase that flips the whole story on its head. He called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society. Not affluent because they had lots of stuff, affluent because they had lots of time. Their wants were few, the environment provided, and the rest of the day was theirs. Compare that to you. 8, 9, 10 hours of work. Then the commute, the emails after hours, the errands, the life admin. Sigh. By that math, a Stone Age forager may have had dramatically more genuine leisure time than a modern office worker with a smartphone and a coffee machine and a productivity app. So the real question was never, how did ancient humans survive the grind? The grind is our invention. The real question is the one nobody expects. What on earth did they do with all that leftover time? And the honest first answer is, we don't fully know. because you can't dig up an afternoon. Boredom leaves no fossils. But we can look at what they made, what they left behind. And humans everywhere still do the moment they're given nothing to do, and the picture that comes together is wonderful. Here's a genuinely deep question, and I want you to sit with it for a second. Could an ancient human even feel boredom the way you do? Because boredom is stranger than it looks. It's not just having nothing to do. Animals with nothing to do mostly just rest. Boredom is that specific, itchy, restless feeling, the sense that you have unused mental energy and nowhere to put it. That time is passing and you want something to happen. It's the mind idling too high. And that feeling requires a certain kind of brain. One that can imagine alternatives, that gets restless when it isn't stimulated, that craves novelty. In other words, boredom may be a side effect of being smart. The same big, hungry, seeking brain that let humans conquer the planet is a brain that hates sitting still with nothing to chew on. Give a powerful problem-solving machine no problems to solve, and it doesn't switch off. It starts generating its own. So yes, almost certainly ancient humans got bored. And that turns out to be one of the most important facts about them. Because a restless, understimulated, wildly capable brain, handed hours of empty time every single day, is not going to sit quietly. It's going to invent things just to make the feeling go away. Boredom, it turns out, might be one of evolution's sneakiest engines. Let me show you what that bored brain actually built. Here's the first and biggest thing bored humans did, and it's so obvious we miss it. They talked to each other. Endlessly. But not the way you might think. When researchers study conversation in small, close-knit communities, they find that a huge amount of it, some estimates say the majority, isn't about hunting strategy or tool-making or survival at all. It's about other people. Who did what? Who's sleeping with whom? Who's lazy, who's generous, who cheated, who can be trusted? We have a word for this. Gossip. And we treat it like a guilty little vice. But one influential theory from the anthropologist Robin Dunbar argues that gossip is basically the reason human language exists at all. His idea is that other primates bond by grooming each other, literally picking through fur for hours. But as human groups got bigger, there wasn't enough time to physically groom everyone. So we evolved a shortcut: talking. Gossip is social grooming at a distance. It's how you keep track of a big, complicated group without touching every member of it. Which means all those idle hours around the fire, gossiping about who's a jerk and who owes who a favor, that wasn't wasted time. That was the invisible machinery holding society together. The bored, chatting, fire-lit human was quietly running the software that made large-scale human cooperation possible. Your group chat, your office rumor mill, your inability to stop talking about that one drama, that's a Stone Age survival tool that never switched off. The first thing a bored human reached for wasn't a tool. It was another human, and something to say about a third human who wasn't there. Now stack something on top of gossip. Because once you can talk about people who aren't present, you can talk about things that aren't real. And that's where it gets magical. Picture the fire again. The food's gone, it's dark, it's too early to sleep, and there's an itch of unused time in everyone's mind. So somebody starts talking. But this time it's not gossip about a neighbor, it's a story. About a great hunt that grew a little in the telling. About where the first people came from. About the giant animal that lives in the mountain, and what happens to those who wander too far. Storytelling might be the single greatest thing boredom ever produced. And we actually have a fascinating clue about how central it was. When researchers studied the same sand people, they looked at what people talked about during the day versus at night. During the day, conversation was practical. Land, food, complaints, jokes, gossip. But at night, around the fire, something changed. Surprise was the overwhelming majority of nighttime talk Around 80% in that study was stories. Tales of people far away, of ancestors, of the spirit world, of adventures. The night, the fire, and the empty time turned humans into storytellers. And storytelling isn't just entertainment. A good story teaches you what to do when you meet a stranger, how the world works, what your people believe, who you are. It packages hard-won knowledge into something so gripping you can't help but remember it. Firelight extended the day into hours that were useless for work, but perfect for imagination. Some anthropologists, this nighttime storytime was one of the most important classrooms in human history. A place where culture itself was invented, refined, and passed down, all because people had time to kill and a fire to sit around. The bored human didn't just survive the dark, they filled it with entire imaginary worlds. Real quick, if you're enjoying this, do me one tiny favor and hit subscribe. This channel is all about the weird, true story of our ancestors, and there's a new one every week. That's it, back to the fire. Here's where boredom stops being useful and starts being human. Somewhere around 40,000 years ago, and probably much earlier, humans started doing something no survival pressure required. They started making things beautiful. And I don't mean useful things done nicely. I mean things whose only purpose was to exist and be looked at. Go into a cave in France or Spain, and you'll find walls covered in paintings, bison, horses, lions, herds of animals surging across the rock, some of them stunningly, breathtakingly good. People crawled deep into pitch-black caves by the light of a flickering lamp, and painted masterpieces in places almost no one would ever see. Why? Nobody fully knows. Ritual maybe. Magic. Teaching. But some of it, surely, was the same impulse that makes a bored kid doodle in the margin of a notebook, the overflow of a mind with time and energy and nowhere else to put it. And it's not just the famous caves. People carved little figurines. They drilled tiny holes in seashells and animal teeth to string them into necklaces, jewelry, tens of thousands of years old. They ground up minerals to make pigment and painted their own bodies. There's a shell found in Indonesia with a deliberate zigzag pattern scratched into it that may be 400,000 years old, scratched not by a modern human, but by Homo erectus, an earlier ancestor entirely. Surprise! Somebody with a brow ridge and a small brain, hundreds of thousands of years ago, sat down and made a pattern for no reason we can name, except that they wanted to. That's the thing. Beauty is expensive and useless in pure survival terms. You cannot eat a necklace. A cave painting does not keep you warm. Every hour spent making something lovely is an hour you had to spare. Which means art is, in a way, a monument to leisure. It's the fingerprint of a species that had solved staying alive well enough to start asking, yeah, but what else? The bored human looked at a plain shell and thought, this could be more. And that thought is basically the whole history of everything we call culture. You know who's really good at handling boredom? Kids. And ancient kids were doing exactly what kids do now, playing. Endlessly, inventively, and with whatever was lying around. We don't have to guess much here, because play is everywhere across human cultures, and it's deeply woven into how young mammals learn. Ancient children almost certainly wrestled, chased each other, played hide and seek, made up games with rules, competed to throw things the farthest or run the fastest. They mimicked the adults' play hunting, play cooking, play fighting, which conveniently is also how they learned to do the real thing. And adults played too. Across the ancient world we find evidence of games these board games scratched into stone, gambling with knucklebones. Some of the oldest board games we know of are thousands of years old, complete with pieces and rules people took seriously enough to bury with their dead. Sport, competition, I bet I can beat you at this. These are ancient urges. The moment humans had a spare afternoon, Some of them started inventing ways to win at things that didn't matter, purely for the joy of it. Play is boredom's most joyful child. It looks like a waste of time. It's actually how a young brain rehearses being alive, and how bored adults manufacture the one thing empty time can't provide on its own: stakes. A game turns nothing into something, into tension and triumph, and a reason to care what happens next. Now for the strangest one. Go back to you, lying in the grass at the start of this video, staring up at the sky. Ancient humans did that a lot, and they weren't looking at light pollution and a couple of dim stars like most of us do. They were looking at the full, staggering, undimmed night sky, thousands of stars, the bright river of the Milky Way pouring overhead, the moon marching through its phases, planets wandering against the fixed stars. Every clear night, free, the most spectacular show imaginable, and they had nothing else to do but watch it. So they did. And a bored, pattern-hungry brain staring at that sky night after night is going to do what bored human brains always do. Find shapes, tell stories, look for meaning. They connected the dots into constellations. They noticed the stars wheeled with the seasons, that certain risings meant the rains were coming or the herds were moving. They tracked the moon and built the first calendars. They watched the sky and started asking the biggest questions a human can ask. Where did all this come from? What are we? What happens when we die? Some anthropologists think this is a real root of religion and science both. A restless mind, given endless quiet time under an overwhelming sky, refusing to just look, needing instead to explain. The same boredom that produced doodles on a shell, scaled up, produced myths about the heavens and the first careful measurements of time. Astronomy and astrology, gods and calendars, all partly born from ancient people with nothing to do but stare upward and wonder. The bored human didn't just fill the empty evening. They looked up into the biggest emptiness of all and started building meaning out of it. Now, I'd be lying to you if I made boredom sound purely wholesome. Because a restless, understimulated brain doesn't only make art and stories. Sometimes it makes trouble. The exact same itch that drives a bored person to create can drive them to pick fights, take pointless risks, stir up conflict, or chase a thrill just to feel something. Anyone who's watched a group of teenagers with a long empty afternoon knows "we were bored" is the origin story of an enormous amount of human stupidity. Laughter that was surely true in the ancient world too. Some of that spare time went into feuds, rivalries, dares, and dumb, dangerous stunts. Boredom is a fire, and fire cooks your food or burns down your camp, depending on how you handle it. And there's a quieter danger too. That restless feeling, left with nowhere healthy to go, can curdle into something heavier, a kind of listlessness, a hunger for meaning that isn't being fed. Humans need engagement the way we need food, which is maybe why every culture we know of built so many rituals, ceremonies, dances, festivals, initiations. Not just to worship, but to fill time with structure and intensity and shared purpose. To give the restless mind something big to hold on to. A festival is, among other things, an incredibly effective cure for the boredom of a long, featureless stretch of ordinary days. So ancient humans weren't floating through blissful, empty leisure. They were doing the same thing we do. Managing a powerful brain's need for stimulation, sometimes brilliantly, sometimes badly, and building an entire culture of stories and games and ceremonies, partly to keep that need fed. Let me bring this back to the question we started with, because the answer is a little surprising. Did ancient humans feel bored? Almost certainly, sometimes, yes. The itch is old. It comes with the brain. But here's the twist. They may have been far better at boredom than we are. When your whole life is lived at the speed of a walking pace, when there's no expectation of constant novelty, when a long quiet evening is simply normal, the empty time doesn't feel like a problem to be killed. It's just the texture of being alive. The ability to sit for hours, to watch a fire, to let the mind wander without reaching for a device, is a skill. And it's one they had by default, and many of us have quietly lost. Because here's the uncomfortable mirror. We have removed boredom almost entirely from modern life. Every empty second, the elevator, the queue, the ad break, the walk to the kitchen, we now fill instantly with a glowing screen. We've never been less bored. And a lot of people suspect we've paid for it, because boredom isn't just discomfort. It's the fertile emptiness where the mind wanders, connects, daydreams, and creates. It's where the story and the doodle and the big question come from. Our ancestors had that emptiness in abundance, and out of it they built basically everything. So when you next find yourself waiting with nothing to do, and you feel that familiar reach toward your pocket, consider, just for a second, doing what humans did for 100,000 years instead. Look up, let the mind idle, get a little bored, because what we do know is this. For the vast majority of human history, our ancestors had time, real, deep, unhurried time, and instead they filled it with the most human things imaginable. They talked and gossiped and bonded. They told stories in the dark and invented entire worlds. They made plain things beautiful for no reason at all. They played games and looked up at the stars and asked what it all meant. They were, in the very best sense, bored out of their minds. And that boredom built us. So next time you're stuck with nothing to do, put the phone down, look up, and let yourself get a little bored. You never know what your brain might build. If you want more stories like this one, I'll see you around the fire.